Today I'm using my desktop CNC machine to build this one-of-a-kind Arrowhead display case. It features an epoxy poured face, a velvety flock surface to display your artifacts, and a magnetic display cover with a built-in acrylic shield to protect everything. If you want to learn exactly how to make one of these yourself, stick around. Let's get into it. A friend recently asked me to build him a display case for his collection of arrowheads and gave me pretty much free rein on how I wanted to design it. He did show me this listing on Etsy and asked that I keep the same general theme, but the only other stipulation was that the design that I made hold at least 10 arrowheads. Now I know absolutely nothing about the world of arrowhead hunting, so I did clarify with him to get some general dimensions as well as how you mount these things to the wall. But once I had the information in hand, I got started on what I think is going to be a pretty badass design. Over the past few weeks, I've been playing around with ChatGPT's image generator because I thought it might be a useful tool in designing CNC projects. It turns out I was right. I knew I would have to do a ton of editing to the headdress to make the display work, so I mostly just focused on finding the coolest looking face. This is the final image that I settled on, not only because I like his expression, but also his features are simple enough where I know the CNC won't have too much trouble carving them. I've been doing this long enough to know that more detail usually equals more problems, so keep it simple, stupid. Once I had picked out the face, I used a combination of Inkscape, SketchUp, and Carbide Create to edit the image and come up with a 3D design that I could carve out on the machine. The very short version of that process is that I used Inkscape to convert the image into a vector file, and then switched between Inkscape and Carbide Create to edit a lot of the nodes until I had a design that I was happy with. Once I had that image settled, I imported that into SketchUp and then extruded everything into the third dimension. I spent a ton of time within SketchUp playing around with different parts and components, but in the end I settled on a 4-component design. So the main face will be made from 3/4 inch maple that's inlaid with black epoxy to create the image. That will be attached to the backboard, which will be made from 1/2 inch plywood and have a flocked red surface where the arrowheads will be attached with the hot glue. If you're not familiar with what flocking is, don't feel too bad. I was in the same boat a few weeks ago. Basically, it's a process where you apply a thin layer of glue and cover it with a very fine powder, which results in a suede-like finish. I've already gone ahead and tested a piece just to make sure everything would work with the hot glue, and if you stick around to the end of the video, I'll show you exactly how easy it is to apply. That backboard will be mounted to the wall using keyholes that are carved into the back, and attached to the front of it with magnets will be a 3/4 inch MDF display frame that has a custom fit acrylic cover. Because MDF is fairly heavy, I did add 2 pins toward the top to help kind of balance the weight. The final result should look something like this. So with my design finalized, I can finally get started on the fun part of this project, which is actually building it. With all of my components laid out on the same plane within SketchUp, I was able to export that as a 2-dimensional image and import it directly into Carbide Create, where I could start assigning CNC toolpaths. For the sake of saving time within this video, I'm only briefly going to go over the required CNC bits and toolpaths for each of these components, but for extremely detailed information on anything that I may have missed, make sure to check out the link down below in the video description for the complete build plans. Not only will you get all the required SVG files for building this project, but you'll also get a multi-page PDF instruction manual that covers everything you'll need to know from hardware and materials to toolpath instruction, all the way to the assembly and finishing process. So with that being said, with my cut sheet in hand, I've already gone ahead and cut everything down to size, and now I can get started on the first component, which is the main face. All right, so sorry for the long music montage. I figured that was just the easiest way to show you how all these items were carved and finished. But now that that is done, we can move on to the final stages of this project. I already went ahead and added some magnets to both the back cover and the display frame after the lacquer was dry, and I also attached the acrylic cover to the display frame with number 4 screws and nuts. I have some pretty fat fingers, so I kind of messed around with that for a while since the screws were so small, but we got there in the end. And this is what we're left with before we add the flocking. We want to add flocking to the inside of the headdress within this carved line here. So before we do that, we need to mark it out with painter's tape. So let me go ahead and show you the easiest way that I found to do that. I ended up going around the perimeter of the line and covering it with painter's tape, not really caring about how neat I was being, because I then later came back with a pencil and traced the line over the tape and cut it out with the tip of the pencil and also with the help of a razor blade. This allowed me to come back and remove the tape and only reveal the exact area that I wanted to add the flocking to. Now when it does come to adding flocking, it's pretty straightforward. Just make sure that you have some paper underneath the area that you want flocked, because whatever's left over in the end can be salvaged and put back in the container. From there, just mix up your glue and use a brush to apply a fairly heavy coat just to make sure that everything is fully covered. After that, you can apply the actual powder using this special tube applicator that came with the kit that I bought, and I'll link the site down below to flockit.com where I purchased this particular flocking, and I have no complaints about it whatsoever. It works really well. And you may have noticed that the glue is also the same color as the flocking, and that's to make sure that even if you miss some areas or don't quite cover it all the way, it won't look too bad because, well, you won't be able to tell the difference. It does say in the directions that once you think you've added enough powder to just keep adding more. So as you see here, I added a whole bunch of powder and then let it sit overnight. After 24 hours, I came back and banged off all of the extra powder and tried to salvage anything that I could by putting it back in the container. Once that was finished, I cleaned up my workpiece and this is what we're left with. I think it looks pretty good. So with our flocking complete, we can finish this project by adding 2 dowels into the top of the backboard just to help with alignment and some weight distribution. And then I'll put everything together and glue the main face into place before going into the back and installing 3 screws into the 3 designated holes that we carved out on the machine. And once that's finished, this is what we're left with. I think it looks pretty great. The screw holes are set at 16 inches on center so that you can screw into some studs if you want to, but it really isn't as heavy as I thought it would be. But once it's on the wall, it looks pretty good, and I think that my customer is really going to like this. Well, I appreciate you guys for stopping by and watching this video, and if you made it to the end, please hit the subscribe button because it keeps me motivated to keep making these things. And as I mentioned before, the plans for this, if you want to make one yourself on your CNC machine, are linked down below. See you next time.